So today's little skate story thing. This morning, I got a text from my friend Brent Schneider, and he sent a photo of someone skating, and he says, "Do you know who this is?" And so the funny thing is, so it's kind of a blurry and kind of blown out black and white shot of somebody doing a lean air, the method lean air, and but it's from the opposite side of the pool, so it's the back of the skater is facing the camera. So he says, "Do you know who this is?" And when I first looked at it, I thought, "Oh, that must be like some skate park, either like back east or maybe in another country, and a long time ago." Because my first impression was like, "Wow, that pool looks really horrible. The tiles all falling apart. The coping looks all beat up and terrible. The pool looks horrible in the photo at first glance, And then I looked at it a little more, and sure enough, it was the Del Mar Skate Ranch keyhole. So, yeah, see, there we go. Even at first glance of an old photo turns out to be me, I thought the pool looked horrible. But anyway, that beside the point. So he says, "Hey, do you know who it is?" And I'm looking at the things like, oh, Air Jordans, Dale Smith gloves, who made also the Smith caps and things like that, knee gaskets. But it was shot in what looks like the dead of winter. Brr, because I'm wearing sweatpants in it. And so again, it must have been 63 degrees. Brr, Del Mar, rough and tumble winter in Del Mar. So anyway, so I'm looking at it and I was like, oh yeah, because I'm wearing Air Jordans, I'm wearing those gloves. And then I go, yeah, if you look really closely, I can see the logo on the sweatpants is these things that we got for the 1986 Expo in Vancouver. So there was a contest in Vancouver that was supposed to be sort of an Olympics kind of a thing. So they invited a bunch of countries to bring their top skaters or whatever. And I think it really was just anybody, but they kind of grouped us into different countries. And so I think the amateurs, which I was an amateur at the time, were chosen based on contest placings, I'm guessing. So the thing that I saw, I'll show you how much of the things I saw. I literally saw that much in the photo. There's like that. And I go, oh yeah, those are Expo things. So that little thing, which here's the full side of it. The sponsor was Bear Cover. And but yeah, so in the photo, because of my knee pads, you can only see that much, and it's really blurry, so it looks like this. But me, I'm like, oh yeah, those are the Bear Cover sweatpants that we got in 1986. Yeah, I know, that's how my brain works. It just stuffs all this useless information in there and keeps it in there so that I don't remember things like my mom's cell phone number. But I sure can recognize these sweatpants in a really old photo, and I'll try to share that later on the Instagram so we can see what I'm yapping about. So there's the sweatpants. But for more complete, so here's our uniform. I'll get it, yeah, big. Team USA! So I still have that, and I still kind of fit in this thing from 1986. So the USA Amateur Skateboard Team, as it says there, was I think I'm going to forget somebody, but I know it. We had Tommy Kasel and Ken Fillion from Texas. That Kasel, Koesel, Kasel, yeah, Tommy Kasel, great skater. May not have heard of him, but really good skater and good friend. And then Ken Fillion, hilarious, but also just powerhouse Texas skater. But really good friend. And so he was on there. Henry Gutierrez from Virginia Beach was there, who actually won the vert contest. so there was, and the Gary Sanderson, and the Sanderson family included Eric Sanderson, who later rode for Powell, and then Gary rode for Madrid, and then their sister Michelle Sanderson, who maybe rode for Powell too as a freestyler. So she was probably there too, and the freestyle team, her and April Hoffman. And then Victor Starr was a freestyler, and there's somebody else probably that I'm missing. But anyway, so they're USA amateur team, and of course, they're trying to make us be all Olympiads, and we were troublemakers and weren't having things. And so when they had a big ceremony, and we're all supposed to march with our flag and with our groups and woo, patriotic whatever. And I think I ended up walking in the procession with Brazil, Team Brazil, because those guys were really funny. And I think everybody did that. I think that like Germany and Brazil and all those people were all kind of intermingled with whoever they wanted to. But yeah, you can't make skaters behave when when you're trying to make them fit into a neat little category. It's not going to work. But anyway, so the 1986 Expo contest. The Expo was sort of like a World's Fair, so there was a bunch of really cool exhibitions and things like that, and then we were an exhibition, so to speak. But they had a pro contest too, so really it was just kind of all the people that would normally compete in the normal circuit of skateboard competitions in the 80s. But it was in the setting of that, and we were there for a week, and it was really, really very cool. You can actually find on YouTube. There's a whole video about it called Radical Moves, and I cannot remember for the life of me the kid who made it. And it is a little, it's an 80s skateboard video, but it is actually a nice little glimpse at that contest, and he kind of repeats a bunch of stuff, but it's a pretty funny little story that he builds up, and basically he's a kid trying to get to this contest in Vancouver, and he ends up hitching a ride with a guy who turns out to be Jeff Phillips. So, and we get a little Jeff Phillips in there too. Rest in peace, Jeff, which is nice. So yeah, find it. Radical Moves, and I'm somewhere in there. Oh no, by the way, I ended up with 7th place on the vert ramp, because in the middle of the finals, there's a whole big story about the ramp. I guess I could tell you. I'll try to condense it as much as I can. So we get there to the ramp, and the ramp is this like sort of modular thing they built, and it's about maybe 10 feet high. But the way they had it mounted to this metal frame, the plywood was horizontal instead of vertical, like we normally would mount the sheet of plywood. So that meant that every meter, because we're in Canada, there was a big seam between the sheets of plywood. So when we first tried the first part of the day, when we first trying to practice on it, you're hitting every single seam, and you could barely make it up to the top, and the coping stuck out like ridiculous. Like 20 feet. No, I'm just kidding. They stuck out like that. So you're going up, and you try to go over the top, and then you can barely make it to the top, and then the coping just rejects you because it stuck out too much. And it was loose and rattling all over the place. But they spent some exorbitant amount on this ramp. They said, no, this is the ramp. And the pros got on there, and they were like, no, we can't do this. So they rebuilt on top of the ramp, and they made it like 1.5 feet taller, and put transitions on like over it. Basically, they built transitions over it. But and then they sheeted it with plywood because that was the wood they had, and it was fast, and blah blah blah, and they put it on there, and then it started to splinter. So they had the sheets on the right way, but they were plywood, and they started to fall apart, and Jeff Phillips ended up with a splinter this big that went through the top of his foot, like near his big toe, actually went all the way through, speared his foot all the way through from top to bottom, off to the emergency room. And then Lester Kasai had the same thing. I think it was in his hand. Lester had a giant splinter that went through. So they said, hey, no, cut, we gotta stop. And so meanwhile, this is the week is progressing, and we're running out of time before the contest starts. So finally they rebuild it again, they put masonite over it. And this ends up seriously being like the day before the actual competition starts. So the practice heats, I kid you not, started at like 2 in the morning. So I know that like there was a lot of pros that had like your practice heats at 4:30 in the morning, the day of the contest. I'm like, okay, yeah. So anyway, and I think we ended up the amateurs just ended up getting to practice right before our contest. And so it was all right, and we're kind of making do, and it was still kind of weird, and you could hang up really easy, and blah, blah, blah. So speaking of which, in the middle of the contest, in the middle of the finals, I do an Andrick hand plant, and I hang up. And, in the finals, I am totally committed. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to the next ball, and the next thing you know, I'm like on the bottom, like straight to the bottom on my back and my head. And I was kind of not really KO'd, but I was definitely seeing stars. And I'm like, okay. So I managed to get off the ramp, and I'll never forget this. I get off the ramp, and I'm kind of just trying to get my bearings. And I see come around the back side of the ramp my friend Joe Lopes, who unfortunately is no longer with us here too. But Joe Lopes comes like running around from the other side of the ramp, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, So he's all right. So I'll never forget. Thank you, Joe, for checking in on me in the finals. But at any rate, so I slammed really hard, but a fall in the finals, and it was a jam. Ended up 7th place. But truthfully, Henry Gutierrez was on fire and unstoppable, so he was going to win anyway. But that's how it goes. And so there is my skate story of the 1986 Vancouver Expo contest. Team USA, go go go! For what it's worth,